Hello and welcome back to Kim Reads as we continue with Changes for Kaya. Chapter 2. The Rogue Stallion's Herd. The days were growing shorter now. Kaya heard owls screeching at night and saw geese flying high, signs that the coming winter would be a hard one. But berries were especially thick and plump this year, and with Bringword's leadership, the women and girls were able to pick and store a great many. As the berry season came to an end, the split up. Many journeyed down to Salmon River country to set up with their winter village in the sheltered valley there. Kaya traveled with her family and the hunting party into the mountains for the elk hunts. The men rode ahead, leading the way. The women and children followed with the travois and packed horses. Raven, Foxtail, and other young boys brought up to the rear, driving extra horses to carry back the meat. As they extended the trail, Kaya looked out across the steep rocky hills split by the stony gulches. Whirling ladybugs swarmed up around the horses. The mountainsides glowed with deep green heather and red or orange huckleberry bushes. All around, a blue haze of smoke rose from the valleys and tinted the sky gray with ash. Though cold weather was not far off, the days were dry with no sign of rain. It was still the season of fires. The scouts constantly scanned the mountains and skies for signs of danger. As the women set up their hunting camp, Kaya raised the teepees, then took the twins to where Cayusta and Brown Deer were preparing a meal. The boys were hungry, so Brown Deer gave them some pine nuts to nibble on while the deer meat cooked. Speaking Rain was glad to go down to the Salmon River country, Brown Deer said to Kaya. Kaya agreed. The fires in these mountains troubled her. I'm not afraid of fire, Sparrow boasted. It can't hurt me. Speaking Rain knows better. Fire can hurt you, Brown Deer corrected him. She placed heated stones into the water in the cookie basket, stirring them so they wouldn't scorch the basket. You must always respect the power of fire, grandson, Cayusta added sternly as she put deer meat in the boiling water. Fire is a great gift, but it has its dangers too. You remember the story of the boy who brought fire down from the heavens, don't you? Tell it again, the twins begged. Cayusta smiled at her brothers and at her grandmother. She thought Cayusta liked to tell stories almost as much as the children liked to hear them. And although the winter was the property for storytelling, Kaya couldn't resist telling one now. Long ago, Nimi-Poo had no fire, Cayusta began, sitting down on the tool mat and giving her full attention to the story. They could see fire in the sky, but it belonged to Hunyawat, who kept it in great black bags. When the cloud bags bumped together, they crashed and thundered, and fire flashed through the hole that was made. The fire was lightning. Wingfeather knew this story well. It was lightning, Cayusta went on. How the people longed to get that fire. Without it, they couldn't cook their food or keep themselves warm. The medicine men had beat their drums, trying to get the fire down from the sky, but no fire came. Then a young boy said he knew how to get fire. Everyone laughed at him, and the medicine men said, How can a mere boy do what we aren't able to do? But the boy waited patiently. When he saw black clouds on the horizons, he bathed himself and scrubbed himself clean with fir branches to prepare for his task. Then he wrapped an arrowhead into a piece of cedar bark and put it with his bow and arrow. He placed the white shell he wore around his neck on the ground, and asked his Waikin to help him shoot the arrow into the black cloud that fired. The medicine man that thought they should kill the boy so he wouldn't anger Hunyawat. But the people said, Let him try to capture the fire. If he fails, we can kill him then. The boy wasn't afraid. He waited until a thundercloud loomed overhead, rumbling and crashing as it came. Then he raised his bow and shot his arrow straight upward. Suddenly, everyone heard a tremendous crash and saw a flash of fire in the sky. The burning arrow, like a falling star, came hurtling down among them. It struck the boy's white shell resting on the ground and set it aflame. Shouting with joy, the people rushed forward to get the fire. They lighted sticks and dry brown bark and hurried to their teepees to start fire of their own. Children and old people laughed and sang. When the excitement died down, people asked about the boy, but he was nowhere to be seen. There lay his shell, burned so that it showed the color of fire. Near it lay his bow. Men tried to shoot with that bow, but not even the strongest man could bend it. The boy was never seen again. But, and here Kai used to touch the beautiful shells that fastened her braids, his abalone shell is still touched with the colors of flame, and the fire he brought down from the clouds burns in the center of the teepee. She said, finishing the story. Then she fixed her steady gaze on the twins. A sharp line between her eyes deepened. Listen to me. You must try to be as strong and generous as that boy of long ago. Kaya was glad to hear the old story another time, but she thought again of Speaking Rain's worry about fires. She vowed to keep watch for them as she searched for the surrounding countryside for signs of her horse. On the day before the hunt, Tota hobbled the lead mare with a rope attached to her forelegs so that she couldn't wander away. He wanted the horses close by that he could easily round them up before first light. He invited the hunters into his teepee to talk over plans for the hunt. Then the men gathered in the sweat lodge to make themselves clean. They thanked Hunyawat for all his gifts and prayed that they would be worthy of animals they needed for food. Kaya could hear the prayer songs rising up to their creator. The night everyone slept a whole short while. Kaya heard Tota and Cut Cheek rising in the dark to join the other men. They took their bows and arrows and put on headdresses of animal hides to disguise their human scent. Kaya, Easter, and Brown Deer quickly dressed themselves. They rode away from the camp long before sunrise while the white elk was still feeding out, returning their bedding place from the salt lick. Everyone dismantled from the valley, where scouts had discovered the elk herd. Raven and the boys looked after the horses while the others went forward on foot. Quickly and quietly, the hunters took up positions at the arrow end of the valley, downward from the elk. At the end of the valley, the women and girls fanned out in a broad V to drive out the elk ahead of them toward the waiting hunters. They took care not to startle the elk as they moved slowly forward. If the elk started running, they plunged right past the hidden men who wouldn't be able to get the clear shots. Kaya concentrated on the rustle of the elk moving through the plummeted bare grass. She could make out the tips of their antlers, the flash of tant and rumps, and the flicker of ear tips. Even in the faint light, she could see their tracks on the worn game trails. Birds flew up all around her, and from time to time a woman added her whistle to the bird calls, making her position known to the others. Then Kaya remembered that she should be on the lookout for fires, too. She scanned the mountain slope at the far end of the valley. There was no sign of smoke on the plateau there, but the shape moved among the pines, and she thought she heard a distant whinny. Holding her breath, she stood still and peered through the dim light. Gradually, she made out horses emerging from the tree to graze. Kaya's heart sped. Could that be the small herd that buffalo hunters had seen? Could Steps High be with them? Kaya stared hard, but the horses were far too off for her to see them clearly. As Kaya walked forward again, but her racing thoughts tumbled ahead, one over the other. What if she slipped away from the others to get a better look at the horses? Couldn't she run up to the ridge for a better view and be back before the slowly moving out her reached the hunters? Or couldn't she get a mount and ride close enough to the horses to whistle for Steps High if she was with them? Maybe she would round up the horses by herself. Think of how proud of her everyone would be. Then right then in front of her, a pair of magpies flew out of their dome-shaped nest in the thorny bush. Crying boldly, they swooped upward among the other birds. Like an upraised hand, the sight of the magpies halted Kaya's racing thoughts. No, she must not act in a way that she could be called magpie ever again. It would be irresponsible to go after the horses by herself. She must follow in Swan Circling's footsteps and do only what was best for her people. She must work with the others so that there would be food for all. Whistling to signal her place in the group, she drove the elk toward the waiting hunters. The hunters' arrows were swift, and their aim was true. Many elk gave themselves to Nimipu that morning. Then the women and the girls prepared the meat to go packed back at the camp, where they would be cooked some of it and dry the rest. Kaya could tell by Brown Deer's shining eyes that Cut Cheek had hunted well. He'd given the elk he killed to her parents as a sign of respect. Kaya couldn't wait any longer to talk to her about the horse herd she'd seen at the sunup. She found Tota lifting a heavy bundle of meat onto a travois. Quickly, she heard the horses she'd seen. Jumps back, thinks there are horses, Tota. Steps High might be with them, she added, trying to hold down her excitement. Tota put his firm hand on her shoulder. Daughter, there's not much chance that your horse could be with that herd. But there's some chance, isn't there? Kai insisted. Steps High could have strayed off and come back this way. Tota thought for a long moment. That's possible. We'll go look for the herd, he said. I'll ask Raven to come along. He's not needed here right now. Let's see what he can find. Kaya mounted a chestnut horse and rode out of the valley behind Raven and Tota. They followed a game trail that led upward toward the plateau where she had seen horses grazing. The sun was high overhead, and the heat waves shimmered over the stony hillside. She was sure she'd seen the horses near those pines ahead, but now there was no sign of them. Had the lead mare taken the herd where it was cooler? The trail left behind the horses curved around the mountain and angled down the northern side. Kaya's gaze swept across slopes dotted with stunted firs and hunchbacked pines, bent down by past winter snows. Deep gulches dragged down the mountain in every direction. The herd could be in any one of them. Would they be able to find the horses before they had to rejoin the hunting party, now a long way away? The trail descended more and more steeply, and after they found themselves in a narrow canyon where the thick grove of tall firs grew. Spears of sunlight shafted down through the canopy of branches, and the shadowed air was cooler. A small stream snaked through the trees. Tota signaled Kaya and Raven to halt their horses and let them drink. Kaya slipped off the chestnut's horse she rode, and she knelt upstream down the horses, drinking from her cupped hands. The springing water was clean and cold, and she was grateful for it. When she glanced up again, she realized the patches of dappled light in the grove of trees was moving. Slowly and silently, as if in a dream, a few horses appeared in the grove, and then a few more. Coming to the watering place, they stepped back around the fallen logs. When the lead mare spotted an intruder, she halted in her tracks, and the other horses came to stop behind her. Kaya got slowly to her feet. Tota and Raven stood too. Then Tota pointed to a horse barely visible behind the others, a horse whose black forehead was marked with a white star. Steps High, Kaya whispered, almost afraid to breathe. In the same moment that she recognized her beloved's sight, a long-legged spotted foal crowded against Steps High's side. Her horse had a little one. Tota climbed on his stallion runner again. Raven jumped back on his own horse too. Whistle for your horse, daughter, Tota said softly. She'll recognize your whistle. Call her to you. Kaya's heart thudded, and her lips were dry. She licked them and managed to make the shrill whistle with which she'd called Steps High so many times. Her horse ears shot up. Kaya whistled again, and Steps High began to move towards her. The foal followed closely. Come on, girl, Kaya urged her horse. She whistled a third time. Just as the air was split by the stallion's scream of fury, the rogue stallion had come down from the hill to claim his herd and protect it. The rogue was a reddish bay with a black mane and tail. Swift as an antelope, he plunged through the trees and across the clearing to guard his mares. His nostrils flared and his eyes shone in defiance as he screamed his challenge at the intruders. And he lowered his head almost to the ground, his neck outstretched as he driving them into a bunch. Tota had rawhide rope already. Raven coiled his rope too and began circling around the kneeling horses. Whistle again, Raven cried to Kaya. Keep calling your horse. She wants to come to you. Kaya repeated the whistle. Steps High swung around, trying to elude the rogue. Each time she swerved away from him, he drove back with the other horses. Tota, on runners, circled the herd in the other direction to distract the road. The road pawed to the ground, snorting and trumpeting to dry off the challenger, screaming fiercely that these mares belonged to him alone. When the rogue's back was to her, Kaya rode around the herd. Steps High made another dash for her, breaking away from other horses. Kaya swung around and swiftly threw it through Steps High's head. She had her horse again. In a burst of speed, Kaya, on the chestnut horse, rode away from the herd. Leading Steps High, the foal running behind, galloped off. Raven on his horse quickly caught up with Kaya. Let's race, he called to her with a grin. Is your horse still fast? Tota came galloping out from the road of the valley, the rogue's shrill trumpeting echoing behind them. Stones clattered from under the horses' hoofs as they ascended the narrow trail that led over the ridge. Heading back to the hunting party, they made their way through a broad canyons and deep gulches. As they rode, Tota studied the sky and the puffy, misshapen clouds on the updraft. He seemed worried. In a narrow canyon, he said, wait here, I want to look at that countryside from the crest of that hill. Kaya slipped from the chestnut horse and went to Steps High. Her horse shuddered and then pushed her head affectionately against Kaya's shoulder. Kaya ran her palm down the muzzle, soft as doe skin, and stroked the powerful jaw and sleek neck. She gazed into Steps High's dark, glistening eyes and felt her own fill up with tears. You've chosen to be my horse again, she whispered. Katsi Yao Yao, my beautiful one. The foal muzzled Steps High's flank. Raven, look at her foal, Kaya cried. She smiled at the foal's short brush of long tail, long legs, and big eyes. Isn't he handsome with all those black spots? Won't he be? The sound of a running horse interrupted her excited words. Tota reined in around her, hooves plowing at the sand, a motion for Kaya to mount the chestnut horse again. There's a fire just over that ridge. The wind is spreading this way. We have to get out of the gulch. He kept his voice low, but she heard the warning in his tone. Kaya glanced at the ridge line. She saw a plume of smoke, but it was thin and white. It didn't look threatening. 3 or 4 small spots burned near the top of the ridge, but the grass was thin and sparse, and the blazes no longer than cooking fires. What had Tota seen that alarmed him so? Stay with me and close, Tota said. He urged Runner on the narrow game trail that ran away the gulch. Kaya jumped back on the horse, on the chestnut, clasped Steps High's rope tightly, and followed her father, with Raven coming right behind. When she looked back again, only moments before, more fires burned from sparks blown to the scrub brush. As she could hear something hissing and glowing in the distance. Like a mountain lion, the fire was leaping after them. And that's the end of that chapter. See